this computer. Okay, we're starting our empathy circle, and the question is, how might we build the empathy movement, or whatever is alive for you? Who wants to be the first speaker? And select whoever you want to listen, since everybody here is familiar with the practice.
Sure. I will be the first speaker.
Thank you, Dwayne.
And, I was wondering if Jana would like to be my listener.
I'd love to.
You know, the question is, how do we build the empathy movement? Well, the first thing is we're already doing it.
Dwayne's given a long pause. So the first thing that is that we're already building an empathy movement, and that's how we're doing it.
And so the other part of that for me is how do we continue to build on this movement, this energy, this momentum that we've already established?
And then you're wondering how we can continue to grow this empathy movement that we've already established, that already exists.
I think one of the ways is creating different opportunities to apply empathy, to use this process to talk about a diversity of topics.
So one way we can do that is to apply this process to different topics in different contexts and create opportunities for that.
For example, I know that Jana is working on a project, and hopefully she'll speak a little bit about that later, about applying the empathy circle process, connecting it with the peace and healing movement, which I think is another interesting application.
So you're sharing that you know that I'm working on some application of empathy circles to the peace and healing movement, and you're hoping I'll talk about that a little bit. And
yes. And then, you know, some of the other things that people are already doing, it's important to bring more attention to those activities.
And you think it's important to bring attention to what people are already doing?
Yes. I think the other thing that's really important, and I'm not sure how to do it, is getting high school students and university students involved in the movement.
And you're also thinking, and you're not sure how to go about it, is to get high school students and university students involved in the empathy movement.
Yes, and I think that part is really important, because I was first introduced to a reflective listening or a deep listening when I was a high school student.
Mm-hmm. And you feel that's really important, that you yourself were first introduced to empathic listening or active listening when you were a high school student.
And it had a profound influence in my life. I enjoyed speaking, but more importantly, I enjoyed the feeling of being heard.
Mm-hmm. So as a high school student practicing empathic listening, you enjoyed speaking, but you even more than that enjoyed feeling heard.
And I enjoyed connecting with people based on what we had to say, and more of who we are than what we were on the outside.
And you felt it especially valuable to connect with people in terms of what we had to say and what we were on the inside rather than what we were externally.
And the importance of that stayed with me for the rest of my life, has stayed with me for the rest of my life.
The importance of that has stayed with you until now, for your whole life.
Thank you, Jenna. I feel fully heard.
Mm. Thank you, Dwayne. So I get to pick someone. Let's see. I'll pick Larry.
Ready, Jen. Thank you.
Um, so, um, so I've been volunteering with the Peace Alliance for the last year and a half, and that's how I ended up here.
So Jen, I hear you've been volunteering with the Peace Alliance for the last, I think you said year and a half, and that's how you ended up here
Yeah, through Kathy.
with Kathy.
And my connection with the Peace Alliance is with this truth, healing, and reconciliation, or truth, healing, and transformation working group. That is kind of an unofficial Peace Alliance entity.
And you've been working with kind of an unofficial Peace Alliance entity, the Peace Alliance Choose Peace or Reconciliation, something like that.
Yeah, truth, healing, and reconciliation is, truth, healing, and transformation is actually a bill in Congress to establish truth, racial healing, and transformation. Is a bill in Congress that very broadly addresses ethnic groups that have been harmed by the United States government, and a call to establish a commission to heal those historical harms.
So there's a movement in the government to bring about healing and reconciliation for, I'm guessing, individuals and maybe organizations that have been harmed.
Yeah, communities, yeah, groups of individuals, yeah, based on externalities. Mm,
Based on externalities.
yeah. Yeah, like, you know, what direction our eyes go, or what color our skin is, very superficial things that divide our common humanity.
Mhm. Yes, so based on externalities, like as maybe the color of someone's eyes or the color of someone's hair or their beliefs, things that are kind of externalities that could lead to, unfortunately, some kind of a cognitive bias that would give some kind of a justification for attacking those entities.
Yeah, so this kind of unofficial Peace Alliance entity is devoted to supporting that bill and to addressing the harm within that we might externalize towards others, and to connect us all and bind us all in our common humanity, and to value each other.
Mhm. So I'm hearing there's a kind of a common general goal, that is finding out within ourselves, is there any kind of attack, thought, justification for seeing differences and therefore justifying harming others, as well as applying that globally. So it's within and without.
Yeah, how much time do I have?
Oh, 40 seconds.
So I approached Dwayne about creating an empathy circle with truth, healing, and transformation in mind. And I said that I would first reach out to Kathy. So I met with Kathy yesterday, and she's very enthusiastic about the idea. She's enthusiastic about sharing like a 3-minute video, and that would be the topic of the empathy circle. And she's going to approach the Peace Alliance with that and see, maybe we could have a meeting with, she's going to invite Linda. So maybe Linda, Dwayne, Kathy, Dee from the Peace Alliance, and myself will all get together. And it's going to take a couple of months or so to hear everybody and to, you know, develop who will be the audience and what is the purpose and what is the title and so forth of this entity. So this will be a community thing, a community creation. So that's very hopeful and inspiring. And thank you, Dwayne, for taking precious time for meeting with me.
So I'll just give you a visual feedback reflection on what you just said. That's awesome. So you're spreading the empathy circle by bringing truth, within and without and everywhere, and you're contacting with Dwayne and others and Kathy Kidd and bringing about this Truth Alliance.
Thank you so much for your wonderful reflecting. I feel fully heard.
Thank you, Jana.
Um,
Okay, so I could become the speaker. Valerie, can I speak to you, please?
Yes, go ahead, Larry. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Wow, that's really inspiring what Jana is up to, and you know, this idea of kind of truth within and sharing that peace, alliance within and without, and seeing no separation, I guess you'd say, seeing just, I don't know, I'll stop there.
First of all, can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, great. So what you're sharing is that you think it's very interesting what Jana shared. It's about really seeing more within rather than strictly without, and it's very inspiring.
Yes, very inspiring. And the the statement of the external stuff, I guess, externalities, I think it was called, like the color of our eyes, the color of our hair, our religious beliefs, the history. Are you from the north or the south or the east or the west? Those become so insignificant in empathy, I guess.
So the interesting points that you're pointing out that Jana really resonated with you is in terms of the phenotype. So what we look like, what skin color people are, how tall they are, how old they are, all those sort of things that typically put into our assessment very quickly. And then our history, you know, where we're from, what's our background, what's our quote unquote story, that all these things really are quite superficial.
Exactly. And it seems like that's kind of been the history of humanity for a long, long time, thousands of years. We've been focusing on, you know, is someone wearing the right clothes for this season? And if not, there's going to be some kind of punishment.
So it seems like, at least as far back as we can sort of recollect, history has shown us that we seem to be more interested in the fashions, the trends, what people are wearing, the influencers, all these types of things that I'm hearing you say that it really lacks the substance, that we're missing the substance.
Mm-hmm. And from that way of thinking, then there becomes like an internal fear. Am I wearing the right clothes for this season? Those kind of thinkings.
So then what develops naturally is an internal fear, because we're all sort of part of the same system, and so the same community. And so when we're comparing on such a superficial level, it sort of almost destabilizes us, and we begin to feel nervous about what we look like and what we are doing. And it's like an internal fear sets in.
Exactly. And I think that leads to a human dissociation within themselves that leaves them in a state of fear and preoccupied with making sure that they're going with the herd mentality so that they don't get criticized.
So the association I'm hearing you emphasize is within the person. And there is a greater dissociation in terms of with other people, but there's this collective participation that's happening at the same time. So I'm going with the herd. I'm part of this bigger thing. So the association is actually very superficial also, but it's really a dissociation.
Exactly. And my final word is empathy is the antidote to all of that externalizing superficial illusion.
So empathy really is for you the antidote to all of the superficial externalization of who we really are.
Thank you, Valerie. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Okay. Oh, I don't think I've actually ever spoken to you, Graham. Would you mind listening to me?
It'd be my pleasure, Valerie.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really have been sort of thinking about this concept of shared attention. There's a terminology in child psychology called joint attention, and I want to connect those two right now.
And there are two concepts in your mind at the moment. You want to join them. And one is shared attention. I think you said shared attention. And the other one is joint attention. And these come out of the world of child psychology.
Mm-hmm. So the shared attention, so joint attention comes out of child psychology. The shared attention is something that I'm applying to that, meaning that it can be extended beyond how we share attention with children. So it's officially called joint attention. When we're sharing with a child, there's a kite, and then you both point to the kite, you see it, you acknowledge it. And so the child feels included, they feel, there's a memory that's being set, there's a connection that's happening, this sort of thing is happening. But the joint attention kind of gets left in child development, whereas I'm applying the shared attention to extend it into the adult world.
And so you're describing joint attention. And this is a phenomena which sort of resides in the world of child psychology. And doesn't come out, you want to bring it out. But joint attention is the process of, let's say, a mother or a father or a relative, an adult saying, look at the kite, there's the kite. And the child learns that that's a kite and learns that that's the word for the kite. And that's the sort of process of joint attention and all that's associated with it. And you would like to actually take this concept outside of just the child psychology and use it in terms of all of our shared attention.
Mm-hmm, because there really are so many benefits. And this is why it's recognized in child development in terms of healthy child development. And so the continuation really is like a joint empathy, which is sort of what we're talking about here, this shared attention. It's really taking yourself out of just whatever's going on inside you, and you're sharing something together. There's like this space that you're sharing together where you're actually connecting, and you're feeling connected, and you're feeling like there's an acknowledgement there, and there's a safety that develops there. And what my real point is that this starts in childhood. We call it joint attention in psychology, but it really is something that I think needs to be extended out across a longitudinal, like lifetime, that this is something that we need to continue to acknowledge is a benefit right through our lifetime.
So you've helped distinguish between joint attention and shared attention, where joint attention, you said, was about the kite. So we're both together looking at the kite and it's external to us. The shared attention is like sharing an emotional space. This is what I'm feeling, and this is what the other person is feeling, and we are acknowledging this and sharing our acknowledgement, sharing our experience. And you talk about the benefits, particularly of the joint attention, where this is so beneficial to the psychological development of a child. And you would like to extend that outside, not only outside in terms of into a shared space, but almost longitudinally into terms, into our older years, adults throughout the whole of our lives. And you're sort of suggesting that it brings just as many benefits to the adults as it does to the child.
Thank you very much, Graham. I feel fully heard.
Thank you, Valerie. So I'm the speaker. Edwin, would you be so kind and be my listener?
Yep, listening.
Thank you. I have a lot to do with addicts. And I am a volunteer. I have no staff roles. I've got no responsibilities for what they do, no overt responsibilities. And I will stop there.
So you're working with addicts, but it's not about responsible type roles, like the.
Yes, I do not have a formal role. It's a volunteer role, if you like.
Okay. Oh, you're volunteering to support
Yeah.
addicts.
That's right. And the kind of thing that I notice, and here we're extrapolating from what Valerie talked about, and that is that I believe that the foundation of their addictions lies in the idea that they do not know how to communicate. They do not know how to create a shared space, shared emotional space, shared relational space, shared cognitive space. None of those things they know how to do.
So from your observations is that people who are addicted don't have a sense of that shared space that Valerie is talking about, and you're seeing that as maybe a cause for the addiction, or?
Yes, indeed. And I stress it's a cause and not an effect of the addictions. So you can have the same cause creating all sorts of mental difficulties, all sorts of relational difficulties, or addictions and relational difficulties, for example. But the cause has multifaceted outcomes.
So not having this this awareness of shared space just has a lot of maybe negative effects, and maybe addiction would be just one of them.
Just one of many. And so when I talk to these addicts, I try to use, and I mean, it's a modified, cut down version, but I use an empathic process. I aim to connect with the person who's in front of me, respect their competence, respect their autonomy, respect their dignity, all their perspectives, all of that kind of thing. That is my orientation, to actually connect with that.
So when you're working with the addicts, you really try to connect with them, to really respect them for who they are. And it sounds like also try to empathize, be empathic, and create like a shared space.
Yes, absolutely. But I face a lot of difficulties because at the detail level, in other words, with Joe Bloggs, who's an ex-addict or temporarily free of his addiction because he's on this program, they do not trust the listening process. They find it alien, and they think it's pretentious. They don't use that word because that's too sophisticated. But it's something that they are not used to, have never experienced it in their life. And so hearing it and being heard is not something that they actually instantly trust.
So when you're trying to do the empathic listening with them, there's sort of a mistrust that they have of you. It's sort of so foreign to their experience that they just totally trust it. And sounds like you see that as sort of a challenge of how to address that.
Yes, it's a huge challenge. And
Mhm.
Larry, I acknowledge that my time is up, but I just wanted to conclude this thread, if I may. And that is that the organization which helps people solve their addictions, they're not interested in the listening process at all.
Mhm. So this organization is not interested at all in using listening
Yeah.
processes.
And so thank you very much,
Okay.
Edwin. I feel fully heard,
Okay,
and it's over to you now. Thank you.
thanks, Graham. Bill, can I speak to you?
Listening?
Yeah, that's interesting that there is, in terms of the empathic process, in cases where people are sort of suspicious of it, I find it's just saying, is it okay if we do this? Would you be willing to get the sort of the buy-in, say, this is what we're doing, get the agreement to take part? So that's one way to overcome the resistance like that, is to ask people if this is okay. Yeah.
So one way to address an initial resistance or distrust of the process is to outline the basics and then get their okay, saying, this is the process. Is that okay with you?
And also, the reason I'm doing, one of the reasons for the political movement with empathy is that if we can get high profile people to model the empathic listening, it creates a social model for it out there. It's like, oh, the politicians are doing this empathic listening. So it creates a model out in society. So it's not like you're coming in with something really new, that there's this existing model. And that's what I'm trying to do with the politicians, and have them do empathy circles so that they're modeling this for people like Graham's talking about.
So one of the ways you're thinking about building the empathy movement is to get politicians or other high profile people to participate in the process and obviously record it so people can see a model of these people who are quote unquote influencers.
Yeah.
In the broadest sense of the term. And, and then people would then follow suit.
Yeah, so I did make some other notes about for building the movement. So building on what Dwayne said, we are doing it. The part of the way to build it is just to keep dialoguing, and it's a sort of an emergent, ideas will emerge. This idea, there's maybe a tentative idea. If you can share that, have it heard, it's almost like the ideas sort of grow kind of in us, and then they start getting energy, and then you start implementing them. So I think that what we're doing is sort of the cauldron, it's the pot for ideas to bubble up in. So I think it's important that we just have this mutual listening as the starting point.
So you're saying that it's not, it's not just very simple. There's a complexity to building the movement. So you mentioned the influencers, and you also wanted to mention what, Dwayne referenced as far as that we're doing it right now. And so, and that you said that just perseverant and engaging in dialogue and going ahead creates the kind of shared experience and culture and ideas that one can build on.
Yeah, it's almost like a foundation to know that we're willing to listen to each other and be heard. Like, that's a pretty good foundation for a movement, what we're doing right here. Like, a lot of times I feel like we got to go faster, we got to work harder. I feel kind of impatient, but then I know that this is important to build this listening as a foundation. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you're reflecting that just even though at times you get impatient, you want to go faster, you'd like to see it grow faster, you see that this sort of dialogue that we have here is absolutely necessary as building a foundation, a firm foundation for growth.
And I wonder if we need a name, like I like the term empath, but we're empaths, right? We have an identity, but empaths are usually people who are kind of overwhelmed by their empathy. Mm-hmm. So we need maybe a term for an identity, that like the new empaths, people who are strong, grounded, in empathy, that it's not like a weak thing, it's a strong thing. So I'm just kind of playing with terms, a name like that.
Right. So you're now thinking about sort of like a framing or a naming of what we are and what we do. And empaths is one thing, but it's been used and it also has connotations to sort of like they're overwhelmed, empaths are overwhelmed, they're weak. And so you have to like say like the new empaths or super empaths or macho empaths, something that contradicts the preconceived notion. Sorry.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. I love those extra additions.
Breaking the rules. Okay, Sally, would you listen to me?
Hi. Hang on, it's not stable. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, well, I share some of Edwin's frustration and about, this is such a good idea and it has so many obvious benefits to me. I get impatient when other people, don't see it as I do. I'll stop there.
Okay, so you understand some of Edwin's frustration and that you actually also get impatient about how to move forward.
Right, and part of it is there's several stories that I tell. I told it earlier, but I'll tell it again. I have a good friend who I've been kayaking with for 30 years. I'll stop there.
Okay, so, well, I'll just summarize that you have a good friend who you have kayaked with for 30 years.
Yeah, and he was a special ed teacher with me, and so I mentioned when I started to get involved, I mentioned the empathy circle, and he said, "Oh yeah, 20 years ago, we had this workshop, and this woman hadn't met before, listened to me, I listened to her, and I still remember it. It was great." I'll stop there.
Okay, so your friend who's a kayaker is also someone you worked with, and that 20 years ago he was in a workshop and did something similar to the empathy circle.
Yeah, and still remembered it vividly 20 years later. And so I said, well, that's great. I said, for my birthday, I'm going to invite all my friends and just to ask them to give me the gift of listening. I'll stop there.
Okay, so then you told him that for your birthday, you're going to invite all your friends and ask them to give you the gift of listening.
And he said, that's great. I'll send you a card.
And he said, that's great. I'll send you a card.
Yeah. So I've been considering the difference. There are a lot of people who have taken the training or have come to a cafe, have also said how great this is. And then you don't see them, or you do see them, after a period of time. So I was just, I'm kind of trying to understand the human process where something is introduced, and then what's the progression from being, introduced to something to incorporating it or internalizing it.
So there's people that come and go and some people who return. And what is the progression to get people, maybe some kind of organization?
Right, to internalize, make it part of their lives.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was something that struck me in the cops talk. And that was when Edwin put out the call for facilitators. We had tremendous amount of facilitators, but we didn't have a lot of new people. So that to me was, what they say in corporate speak, actionable data.
Okay, I'm gonna go in reverse. You said, well, okay, when you had the cops arrive, I guess on the first day it was fine, but on the second day, it was mostly the trainers, which you defined as actionable data.
Yeah, and I think the difference was that the trainers or the people who have taken the facilitation training, have had a deeper experience over a longer period of time. And so therefore, they do kind of show up for these sorts of things. And so the question then is how to bring people along that path. Yeah, and that's the question. Got it, Larry.
Okay, so how to get the people who don't have this deep experience that all the people who have been trained as facilitators to follow along the same path and commit or just, have that deep commitment or following
Thanks, Sally.
that. Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So let me see what we have. Okay, so it looks, I'm trying to figure out who. Larry? Okay, Larry, you did. Was it Dwayne that, okay. So is there anyone? I'm gonna just go with Jana. Is that okay? I don't want to waste any more time. Okay. Yeah, so okay. I don't want to kind of go over into a different realm, and but as a planner, I have a different experience on understanding how to go from a idea and move it into actually a project that is implemented. And I'll stop right there.
So you're going to shift a little bit and talk about from your experience as a planner that you have experience going from an idea to something that's a doable project.
And done.
And done, completed project.
Okay. All right. So you learn, well, first you have to coin the name of the what you're doing and have everyone, agree. Then there's a goal that you write, and this goal could be from A to Z, Z being that everyone in the world is doing empathy. You have a mission statement, which is basically achieving the goal. You have a list of objectives. So I think Edwin's doing a really good time, but I'm gonna just stop right there. It's too much.
So, so in this process of going from idea to completion, that you start off with the name of the project that we can all get on board. You define what the goal is. You have a mission statement that actually says what the goal is, and then objectives.
Okay. So as for objectives, I think a lot of that is happening right now. Education, general population worldwide, politics, governments, scientists, and law enforcement. So I would kind of break that down in how these different groups influence, let's say, the scientists in climate change, okay, as an example.
See, I neglected to say earlier that as far as the mission statement, it's like the goal is to reach all the people on the planet with empathy. And then now you're breaking it down into different groups, and the different groups that are involved with empathy and the spheres of influence. And you gave examples of many kinds of groups, law enforcement and others. And then the scientists, for example, their sphere of influence is climate change.
Okay, so it's actually a list of objectives. And so the objectives would actually be broken down into every aspect of society. And so, which I think when you do that and you break it down by category, then you're not missing anything.
So the way to reach everyone is you clarify the objectives, and by objectives, you break down to every category of society. And when you have a complete list, then you're not leaving anybody out. You have everyone.
Okay, so that's your list of objectives. And so I think the swimming around and being kind of in but out, and well, anyway, so that in and of itself is the planning phase. And then you move on from there into implementation through, there's a lot more, but I'm just going to leave it at that.
So you've covered the beginning of the process of bringing a project to completion, and and what else?
Okay, well, I'll just kind of summarize. You have a name, goal, mission statement, list of objectives, and at that point, you've gone through the planning phase.
So the planning phase starts with name, goal, mission statement, and objectives. And these different groups belong to objectives. And then you have implementation, and there's a lot more, but we're pausing there.
Right, so that's later. So that's kind of what the planner in, well, all the way through my career, you know, so that's it.
So this is the planning phase, and that's what you're expert in.
Right. Hopefully heard. Thank you.
And we'll go back around. Dwayne, you want to listen to me?
Yes.
Well, I really appreciate Sally's methodological approach to building an empathy movement.
You really appreciate Sally's methodological approach to building an empathy movement.
Yeah, it's I have some difficulty with the marketing concept of niching, and I think we need marketing for altruists. And Sally is presenting marketing for altruists.
You really think it's important to create the concept of niching for altruists, and that's really important.
Yeah, niching for altruists includes everybody. It doesn't include some small segment. It includes all the segments. So there in the objectives, she's got all the segments.
Niching for altruists is inclusive. It includes everyone. It's comprehensive, and that's really important to you.
Yeah, not leaving anybody out is really important to me.
Not leaving anybody out is really important to you. Including everyone is really important.
Yeah. Also, when sometimes people talk about motivation, and the motivation is really narrow, like a personal motivation or goal. But if everybody got on board with an altruistic motivation, saw the value of that, the preciousness of that, the importance of that, the significance of that, the impact of that, then we could all have that commonality. And then of course, everyone has an individual expression of how to bring that about. So the niching is more individual rather than in terms of motivation, if that makes sense.
Quite often, people are focused on altruism as it relates to an individual motivation or individual goals, but you would like to see altruism thought of in terms of a collective goal and collective working on the collective good for society.
Yeah, you could say it that way too. I'm sorry, it was too long.
No, please.
Well, there's people who get very narrowly motivated. My personal niche is this kind of people, and these are my perfect ideal client that I want to work with, and I want to grow my personal business for my personal pocket just with this little bit of slice of humanity that I resonate with. So it's kind of narrow. And what I'm saying is, I think it's really important for humanity to value an altruistic motivation.
You think it's really important that humanity values more of an altruistic motivation as it relates to the collective experience? You find that generally people are so focused on their niche market that benefits them, that puts additional money in their pocket, and not focus on the collective good for everyone. And you'd like to see that change.
Yeah. So then it's important to recognize what are the benefits of altruism. Is it really better than, how could it be better than my bank account? But more important than my bank account.
You'd like to pose the question or posit the question of altruism versus individual niche altruism, or altruism based on the collective good, and say, is it really better than putting money in my pocket? Is it better than increasing the size of my bank account?
Yeah. So much suffering comes from the narrow perspective, and so much joy and happiness comes from a broad opening of the heart.
A lot of suffering is a direct result of this narrow vision of things, and the larger vision contributes to joy and positive or healthier experience for people, for the larger population.
Yeah. How much time?
That was it. That was the time.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's see who hasn't spoken for a while. Larry, would you like to be my listener?
Ready, Edwin. Thank you.
I was, as always, my brain is stimulated by some of the information that has been shared in the circle.
So I hear you saying that the information being shared in this circle, you find that your brain is being stimulated by the information shared in the circle.
Yeah. And my challenge is listening and being listening deeply, and not and the impact of the ideas that are generated from listening.
So Dwayne, I hear you saying that your challenge is listening deeply I think you're saying, and at the same time, being stimulated by the ideas that are being shared in the circle.
Yes, in addition to the ideas that are being shared, also the ideas that are generated from the ideas that are shared.
So Dwayne, I hear you saying there's a challenge to be in the circle listening to the ideas that are being shared. And there are also other ideas that are coming from the stimulation of the brain from the ideas being shared in the circle.
Yes. And, when I think deeply about, the challenge of processing the information, being present, and also contributing to the conversation is really challenging.
And Dwayne, I hear you saying that when you think about, being present with the ideas being shared and being present, all that at the same time is really challenging.
Yes. And then with the time left, I'd like to talk more again about how do we build the movement.
So Dwayne, I hear you saying, and with the time that we have left, you'd like to return to the topic of how do we build a movement?
And really it goes back to continuing what we're doing, but also engaging the youth.
And you're sharing that it's continuing what we're already doing, but also including young people.
And that really means starting in the schools and finding creative ways to introduce the concept of empathy, reflective listening, deep listening, being more compassionate.
And for you, this is including empathic listening in the educational system with the young people.
Yeah, with the really young people, introducing the ideas, and then programming that's, as students get older, providing opportunity for programming, experiential learning to help teach or facilitate these values.
And this involves the idea of bringing this into a program so that this is taught throughout the, it sounds like not just in the first grade, but throughout the educational process, that this is taught in a programmatic way.
Yeah, and then as we move into high school and university settings, training peer educators, starting with the peer educator programs and training them to facilitate empathy circles and teaching the skills in that way. There's a lot of, excuse me, I'll stop there.
And then moving along the educational process when they get into the university, teaching them how to do empathy circles and facilitating and.
Yeah, specifically focusing on peer educator programs. There are peer educator programs at the high school level. There's peer educator programs at the university level.
And specifically focusing on the peer programs where people are teaching their peers empathy and sharing.
Yeah, and in conclusion, at the university level, there's peer health educators. That would be a great place to start.
In conclusion, at the university level, there are peer educators, and that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, peer health educators. And thank you, Larry. I feel fully heard.
Peer health educators, and that would be a great place to start.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Bill, would you be my listener?
Listening.
Okay, I'll start the timer. So left click, not a right click. How about that? Yeah, I'm really enjoying our conversation, sharing how to build a culture of empathy, how to, as they say, you can bring the horse to the water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah, so you're enjoying the conversation and you're using the analogy, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah. it really appears that we live in a world on a blue planet where competition with one another has been the quote unquote norm for thousands of years.
So you're reflecting on human history where the dominant paradigm has been competition.
Yes, the dominant paradigm. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Yeah, that it's the domination has been the accepted norm, that, you know, you kind of kill your competition.
Yeah, so it's a hierarchical domination infers a hierarchy, and ultimate competition leads to killing your opposition.
Yeah, like we see it in our sports. I guess we've seen it in sports since chariot races, and you know, we've all cheered for our home team, our baseball, basketball, football, you know, to go out and kill the competition. Let the home team be the victors.
Right. And so you see that idea used figuratively in our local sports, kill the opposition.
Yeah, that is kind of ingrained in our way of thinking for thousands of years.
So this has been reinforced for thousands of years.
Yeah, it's in our movies. You always see, you know, the so-called good guy go out and get the so-called bad guy and become victorious.
Right. And so one of the references is in our movies, the good guy goes out, quote unquote, good guy goes out and kills the bad guy, and he emerges victorious.
Right. And then the good guy can celebrate having destroyed another human being. They can enjoy that.
Right. And so this leads to celebrations over destroying people's quote unquote enemies.
And it's been this myth followed by humanity for thousands of years.
Right. And so this is one way that humanity has looked at our social strata and for thousands of years, but it's not necessarily the only way, I'm inferring that, to look at things.
So when it comes to building a culture of empathy, I think that it becomes first, physician, heal thyself.
Right. So, so then the first step in building a culture of empathy is to turn inwards and heal oneself.
Right. And the first step in that is realizing we've all been indoctrinated into a domination thought system. It's a myth that we believed throughout human history, and we need to face it before we can do anything about it.
Yeah, so this is something that's being reinforced for thousands of years, this domination hierarchy, and we need to face it as a first step towards building a culture of empathy.
Exactly. If we deny it, it will continue.
Mm-hmm. Right, so it's important that we just don't simply push it down and deny it, because it will rear its ugly head in some form or another.
Yeah, it'll rear its ugly head in a projection of that somebody else is the evil one that needs to be separated or dominated or scapegoat. It'll always be someone else until we realize that these thoughts are projections. And that was my time, so I'll stop there.
Sure. So the process is that if we kind of tamp it down or deny it, then when it rears its ugly head, it will be in the form of someone else who needs to have, be dominated or killed or something in order to, progress to go on.
Thank you, Bill. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Sure. Pleasure. All right, Graham.
It'd be my pleasure, Bill. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. It's riffing off something Larry said. And, I don't know what time in history it was, but, thousands and thousands of years ago, a philosopher was talking about this domination hierarchy kind of started from a feeling that man was separated from nature and so therefore had to dominate it to survive. I'll stop there.
And so you're taking an idea from Larry,
Mhm.
where for thousands of years we've had this, if you like, culture of domination where we cannot be equals, but rather one has to be of a higher status or conquer the other.
Yeah. And specifically, sort of us seeing ourselves as removed from nature. And so that, nature either bestows bounty, then it's good nature, or, or floods and fire, then it's bad nature. I'll stop there.
And you were, something I omitted, but you stress it specifically, it's that we maintain that we are divorced from nature.
Mhm.
And we see things in terms of, if nature delivers bountifully, then we are good and nature is good. If it doesn't deliver bountifully, nature is bad, or we are bad, or they are bad if they don't have it. And the theme was that we are divorced from nature.
Right. And so and somewhat it's associated with Western culture. I see plenty of it in Eastern cultures too today. But what it means, we have a dualistic categorization of things. I'll stop there.
And you're noting that this is not just Western culture, but it is here very strongly. You also see this in Eastern cultures, and there's this dualistic view of us and nature, good and bad.
Right. And I've come through, my own personal belief and through my studies, I've come to believe that we're at once an individual, unique and special, even that I can go special. But at the same time, we're integrally involved with the universe. And it is our conditioning, as Larry said, that sees that as a contradiction, but actually in reality, it's not.
And so from your beliefs, from your experience, from your studies, you have grown to realize that we're actually an integral part of everything that goes on around us, nature, space, you name it. And there's nothing special about the individual. There's nothing God blessed about the individual. We are part of nature. And what you're finding, what you're experiencing is that people see this as a contradiction. It's somehow not right. It doesn't carry water.
Right. And I'll just make a small correction in that, yeah, we are special. The individual is special. And that's the problem. We can be special and also integrated. And we are not conditioned to see that. I'll stop there.
Okay. And you corrected something I said, and almost stressing the idea that we can be special.
Right.
And we can be integrated with nature.
Excellent. Thank you, Graham. I feel fully heard.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Bill. Jana, would you be so kind and be my listener?
I can.
Thank you. I'm thinking about the topic, how might we build the empathy movement?
So you're thinking about the topic, how we can build movement of empathy.
And I'm very constrained to implementing it in a very small area, which is the small area is hugely challenging.
We're very committed to implementing empathy in a small area that is very, very challenging.
Yes, and I've mentioned already that I work as a volunteer in this recovery home for addicts.
And so,
And these people, for them, listening is foreign to them. I'll stop.
So you're working as a volunteer in this recovery home for addicts, and listening is very difficult for these individuals.
Yes. Now, even though I've said it's very foreign to them, what I'm doing at the individual level, with the individual addict, is actually working very, very well and very successfully. I'm building connections that I was never able to build before.
So you're now having some success building connections with individuals that you weren't able to do before.
Exactly. And my next phase is so I'm not doing any great big planning exercise, but there are some developmental stages. My next phase is to begin to talk to all the people in authority, the group leaders, their supervisors, the CEO, and the board.
So the next phase after working with these individuals is to share with the people in authority, the supervisors, CEOs, the program directors, the people in charge.
Yes. And there I am hitting up against some very real barriers. And they are, for example, people's status, their perception of their responsibilities. They don't want to be criticized, even if you do it very subtly and you empathize with them in all sorts of ways. They do not want to hear a different message.
So you're encountering obstacles with these people due to their limitations of role and position and how they perceive themselves in the institution, not wanting to be criticized. And so even though you listen empathically to all their concerns, you still find the doors closed.
Yes. And so my next stage is to build a sense of trust and a sense of openness, a sense of influence, whatever the word is, with the supervision in the organization.
So your phase 2 is to try to build a sense of trust and openness with the supervising individuals in the institution.
Yes. And then after that would come the idea of, thank you, Larry, I've got that. So after that would come the idea of teaching the group leaders to listen and teach them what to listen for. And that's, I'll try and finish as quickly as I can, but I'd just like to finish that through. Can you reflect on that one, Jana?
So after establishing trust, if you succeed in phase 2, then phase 3 would be to give the skills of listening to impart the skills of listening to the supervising staff.
And then the fourth level would be, just like Dwayne has talked about, creating a listening resource within the peers. So in other words, you have a peer-to-peer support or amongst the volunteers and the alumni to actually further the whole process of active listening.
So you'd like to follow up on Dwayne's idea in schools and to create a peer-to-peer listening movement for the addicts and people who have completed the program.
So thank you, Jana. I feel fully heard. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Larry.
Valerie, you're there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm not sure if you guys can see me popping in and out, but I've been popped out like 10 times because of the internet connection. So I've turned off my camera, but I'll turn it back on. And I'll do my best to not pop out again. There's nothing really I can do about it, but okay, I'm ready. Go ahead.
Wow. There's so many things I've thought of, in the course of this discussion. I'd like to thank Dwayne for giving me that little window to share what we have been up to.
So you just want to acknowledge everything that's been going on so far, and just to acknowledge Dwayne as well for just that little window of acknowledgement.
Yeah, and Martin Luther King said that if we want to end war, then the people who want peace need to be as organized as the people who want war.
Martin Luther King, you're recalling, said that the people who want peace need to be as organized as the people who are organizing for war.
Yeah, so this movement of empathy is part of a wonderful organization that is contributing towards building peace.
So what Edwin has created here, and what we're all supporting and all of us are a part of, is this wonderful movement of peace, of getting organized and actually doing that very thing to counter the other side.
Yeah, and I love the idea of peer education for high school and university. And I appreciate also Graham's idea of peer education for empathy, for support for peers who have been suffering from addiction.
So you want to acknowledge both what Dwayne said in terms of bringing empathy into schools, and all of us that are learning as we grow up. And you also wanted to acknowledge what Graham is talking about in terms of people who are isolated or traumatized, and they're adults and they're not sort of part of the typical group of people that we sympathize for, and how important it is to acknowledge them as well.
Yeah, I like the idea of peer education. I'm not sure that it's necessary to go all the way around through the supervisors, but one could just build peer education with the peers.
So what you're saying is that there may be an avenue, a direct sort of a direct path, that we don't need to necessarily go through the 9 yards of administrative policies and getting things approved and all the people coming together and talking about it for endless amounts of time and funding and all the rest of it, that we could actually very directly be able to influence people by just peer-to-peer.
Yeah. And an environment, I don't know who said it, maybe the Dalai Lama, I'm not sure. I recently read about the environment being a heart problem, a problem of the heart. So yeah, so just to acknowledge also that idea that Bill said of the connection of us as human beings and the environment. The solution is really a heart problem.
Right. So you're thinking that it might have been the Dalai Lama, but essentially the message is that the root of the problem is in the heart. It is about our heart, and it's about love, and it's about connection with our heart. And so that's really what you want to emphasize, is that this problem that we're intellectualizing really is about the heart.
Yeah, the environment problem, the climate change problem is a heart problem. Wars are a heart problem, or a mind-heart problem. It's how we are applying our minds in a constructive way or in a harmful way.
Right. So how all of the problems that we have created as humans, whether it's climate or any kind of wars or strife or any kind of struggling trauma, whatever these traumas that we've created in society, essentially are a disconnect from the heart. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I still have time? Time. Thank you. I feel heard.
Thank you, Shauna.
Thank you very much.
how about Dwayne? I haven't talked to you in forever. I don't even know, did you talked recently, but it's up to you. Would you like me to pick you?
Sure, I'm available
Okay.
to listen.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So I'm really liking what everyone is sharing. I think that one of the really important bits that I'm getting out of all of this is the comparing and the competing that I think a lot about, and I think about utilitarianism and how a large part of our society is sort of naturally inclined towards thinking that utilitarianism is the best method in terms of how to operate our society, but I don't necessarily agree with that.
You think that you like what everybody's been sharing, and you like the idea of talking about the comparing and the competing, but you think a lot about utilitarianism. Challenging word for me to pronounce. A large part of our society is focused on thinking about utilitarianism.
That's all right.
Utilitarianism, and in terms of how we operate in society, and you think you'd like that everybody's sharing, and I lost part of that at the end.
That was really great. That was pretty much exactly what I said. So that's perfect. It really, utilitarian is like the utility, right? What is the utility of people? What is the use that this person has for me? So I will approach a person. The idea is, and this isn't utilitarianism, this is just utility, but what use does this person have for me? So when I recognize someone, it's like, what is the use that this person has for me? And if I don't recognize that use, that we just sort of drop it, right? We sort of drop the association with that person. So our association with that person and our relationship with that person really is about what is their utility.
I will do my best to summarize that. You again use the word utilitarianism, but then you start talking about utility, and you talked about utility in terms of, what is a person's value to us, and the distinguish between whether or not we find value in that person as it relates to us, and if we don't, we want to push them aside or discard them as not being valuable.
Exactly. And I think the use needs to be recognized as a long-term association. So the quick and fast that we've really gotten used to, particularly in the past 100 years, is in my mind, it evidences a lack of knowledge about what life is, but also a lack of appreciation for what life is.
And so you think it's important to, as we characterize the usefulness of someone, to think about it in terms of the knowledge of what life is, which is.
Let me just, because that was just the way, yeah. So it's the recognition of a long-term association, because if we don't recognize that our associations with people are long-term associations, they're not quick and fast, because otherwise it's just about use. What use do you have for me? And if there's no use, then we're done. So it's about long-term association. What I really want to emphasize, because if we don't emphasize long-term association, I don't think we're acknowledging life we're saying that we don't understand life and what life is about, because life cannot be recognized in a few seconds. So in my view, we have to look at our long-term associations rather than just what use does this person have for me in this moment.
The really important thing that you want to emphasize is the idea of the long-term value of our relationship with other people, not the immediate value of their usefulness as it relates to this moment, and the importance of their value in the long term.
Yes. Yes, it's because I think that empathy to me is about discovery. And that's what when we apply empathy, we discover, and that's also what life is about. Life is about discovery, right? Life is about adventure, life is about challenge, life is about ebb and flow, up and down. And so to me, that long-term slowing down, that Edwin always talks about slowing down and how the empathy method slows things down. It starts to recognize that there's something magical happening here. There's something far beyond what we can just imagine intellectually with our mind, because our mind is about quick and fast. And so slow things down helps us to appreciate that empathy is about discovery and life is also about discovery. And I'll stop there. I'm sorry, Dwayne. I know you.
I'll do my best to summarize. You really want to emphasize the importance of the value of the long-term relationship and the opportunity that this long-term relationship presents for discovering or learning or experiencing new things along that path, or different things. And there's so much emphasis on the short-term value of things, and and you related to the empathy circle and the empathy circle process, and how through the process over time things are able to evolve and come out of that experience, and really it's about the value of the long-term relationships and the opportunities that they provide us with.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's exactly right. Thank you so much, Dwayne. I think that's time, isn't it, Larry? Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Dwayne. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Thank you, Valerie, for a very challenging opportunity. Let's see. Bill, would you like to be my listener?
Sure, Dwayne, absolutely.
Wow. It's interesting. One of my challenges for listening to Valerie is she presents this really poetic, very intellectual, flowing ideas, and I sometimes get caught. Oh, I'll stop there.
It's okay. So one of the challenges that you have listening to Valerie is that she, presents long intellectual flowing ideas, and then kind of stop there, I think.
And I get caught up listening to the idea and the importance of the idea. And then I remember, oh, I have to repeat this.
Mm-hmm. So the challenge is that you're interested and you're engaged in what she was saying, and then, but you may not be preparing yourself mentally to reflect. And so then you have to do these two tracks at the same time. And that's the challenge.
Yeah, because I want to listen, I want to understand, I want to process, and wait, I need to immediately reflect that back.
Right. So in one sense, you're listening to integrate it, and that involves, matching it against your own database of experience, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other hand, you have to focus on what she's saying and being ready to, to repeat it or paraphrase it.
And then I'm also in the process I'm reminded of the challenge of having experience like a brain injury, having a brain injury.
So you're relating it and you're to your own experience where you had a brain injury, or one has a brain injury, not necessarily you.
Yeah, in the sense that, having been in a couple car crashes where I had a brain, experienced brain trauma and loss of memory,
Mhm.
and, you know, s- and how that's connected to um, being a good listener, listening deeply to things.
So you are saying that you did have an experience of some traumatic brain injury in a car crash, and then you're thinking about how that affects your deep listening.
Yes, and in that moment, sometimes I'm able to follow really clearly, and then other times it's not so clear.
Mhm. So your experience is that sometimes is varying, and sometimes you can follow very clearly, and sometimes it's not so clear.
And then I'm wondering, like, is it because of my previous injury? Is it because I'm not present or focused? And, really, this is what's alive for me in this moment.
Yeah, so you're trying to establish the causes of this varying ability to respond. And is it because of the injury, or is it because I'm just not focused in the moment?
Yes. And I'd like to think that I'm present and I'm focused. And so it's really challenging sometimes. I enjoy the process, but it's also challenging for me sometimes.
Yeah. So uh, so you're contemplating that, and sometimes it's very challenging for you, and but you also enjoy that challenge.
Yes. Thank you, Bill. I feel fully heard.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's see. Well, Sally, you haven't had a chance for a while.
I,
Hi, Sally. All right.
Hi.
So I think we're kind of digging around the same thing. I'm going to continue about the seeming paradox between the individual and the universe. I'll stop there.
okay, so we all seem to be moving around between the
Mhm.
seeming paradox and the universe.
Right. So when I thought, when I kind of came to the conclusion that it's not a real distinction between us and the universe, I thought that I should be able to see, if that's true, I should be able to see that reflected in physical reality.
Okay, so that in your mind, there is no difference between us and the universe. We're all connected, and that we should somehow see that reality.
Right. And I had no further to look, I've said this before, but I'll repeat it, than my own body. The experience of my cells and the experience of my personality.
So at that point, you realized you had no further to look than yourself and your cells within your body.
Right. So my cells are sorting all sorts of chemicals that I have no idea. If you showed me a lipid or a protein, I wouldn't know the difference, on a molecular level. But my cells are sorting those at incredible relativistic speeds every second of the day. I'll stop there.
Okay, so you don't know if it's some lipid or some hormonal, any kind of activity in your body, but your cells are doing all these things, and as far as I got.
Yeah, no, and I have no idea. I mean, if you asked me to do what my cells are doing, I couldn't do it. I'll stop
Okay.
there.
So if I asked you what your cells were doing, you couldn't do it.
Right. And on the other hand, my cells wouldn't know about, appreciation of a sunrise or, or maintenance of a relationship or teaching paradigms. They have no idea about that.
Okay, so on the other hand, the cells have no idea of appreciation of the sunrise or things that are external that
Right.
we are supposed to.
Exactly. Yet we are interdependent. I depend on my life for my cells, and my cells depend upon their lives on me.
But yet we are independent. We depend on ourselves for our lives, and and our life. I don't know, I'm kind of lost there. So.
Right. Well, my cells and myself are interdependent for our very existence.
Okay. So there's an independent relationship between your cells and your life.
Right. And I'll just finish by saying, so that suggests there's a larger framework in which we both exist. And that will then bring us to what we're doing here, empathy. And I'll stop.
Okay, it suggests that what we are doing here is a larger framework of connectivity that we don't have any understanding of that within ourselves and external.
Yeah,
around.
I'd say partial understanding, but that was great, Sally. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Let me see. I have to. Yeah, I'm gonna pick Edwin, please.
Listening.
Okay. Well, I don't think you guys are really interested in this, but let me just kind of summarize what I thought about the law enforcement. As a planner, I look at everything in a relationship of numbers, and that's how I see things. So the importance of law enforcement is a 10, 1 out of 10.
Mhm.
And
Can I just
10 being
reflect that
high.
quickly? You have something you want to share, but you're not sure if everyone's going to be interested, but you're going to go ahead anyway. And it's about the law enforcement event that we did. And you really see importance in terms of numbers. And for you, the law enforcement, that's like a 10 in terms of importance.
Right, that's part of my planning training. And so lots of graphs and overlay of graphs. And I'm just looking at law enforcement as a subset of the many.
Mm-hmm. So you're a planner and you see things in terms of numbers and graphs and charts, and this is like a subset. Of this law enforcement topic is a subset of maybe the larger empathy movement.
Right. A lot of times the planner will overlay different features in order to get a better view. So I would say we had excellent participation in the first COP meeting. So second COP meeting was not. So I would kind of give it a rating of not as good as we wanted. So at that point, I would think what you'd want is that the second try, let's say you go over and do it again, would have more success in the second, and it would lead to more participation and new facilitators. Is that too much?
No, that's fine. So you're evaluating the Cop Talk event. The first one was really good. The second one wasn't as good. You want to sort of evaluate that, make it better next time.
Exactly. And so back to Sir Francis Bacon. He has a method of induction, which basically would say, well, why not just say it was a semi-failure and to try something a little different to see if you can make that movement of the second meeting and the blossoming. And okay.
Yeah, so the second meeting you would, call it maybe a semi-failure and sort of set the evaluation of it, and then maybe make it better next time. So.
Right. And so what I would say is you would find a different method, like see what the group leader of the cops would want to do differently to get more participation, and even have them become the leaders and the facilitators. And well, I'm just throwing things out. And that's how I approach in the planning arena.
Yeah, so in planning the next event, you're just throwing out ideas, and maybe it's having some of the people say what it is that they would like to do next time. The people who are in the circles, maybe they could be leaders next time. So you're just sort of brainstorming some ideas for improving the second call.
Right. And so that's really just one subset when the approach grows with the various different aspects. And anyway, do I have a minute left, or am I done?
That was the time. But what I was
Okay.
hearing, Larry, is that this is the Cop Talks is like a subset of all the other sort of calls and circles. And you can take the learnings that are learned in this subset and apply it to other events.
Exactly.
Okay, then speak to Valerie, if I may.
Edwin, listening.
Yeah, with the Cop Talk, the second event wasn't as good. It wasn't as highly publicized as the first one. So there's a lot to kind of evaluate, and a lot of things I would do differently, definitely.
Okay, so the second Cop Talks didn't go as well as the first. You hadn't advertised it as well. And there are some things that you would do differently.
Yeah, and it's been interesting hearing that what we've been talking about. There's been sort of a philosophical thread, and I do think that the philosophical is sort of creating a map, a picture of how the world works, and then how empathy fits into that map. I think that's interesting. I think that's needed.
So what you've seen in the circle today in this session is that there's a lot of sort of philosophy that's brought into how we're viewing empathy and how it's working in the world and what are the potential solutions. And it's all very philosophical, which you're valuing that's part of the process that's necessary.
Yeah, what empathy does is I think it's an integrative, like there's, 8 of us here, And the empathy kind of integrates our understandings of things. And so I see empathy as sort of this integrative. If there's something, like somebody mentioned duality, that the empathy is the process that integrates dual thinking into a coherent shared something or other.
So what I'm hearing is that there's a conversation that's happening here in this empathic style, and then all of us are adding to it. And it's very integrative, where all of us are sharing and sort of pooling our ideas together and playing off one another and considering different things. And in that way, that's really what is sort of like what you see as sort of the empathy happening in real time.
It's a benefit of
this sort
empathy, is
process
the
of
integrative part. Yeah, it's a benefit. So sorry to interrupt you.
The benefit is the integrative part.
And the other thing that I made a note of is the topic of peace came up, and there's a quote by Johann Galtung, who was the founder of peace and conflict studies in the universities. And he says, peace is resolving conflict with empathy, creativity, and nonviolence. It's a never-ending process. So if you want peace, it's just bring conflicts into a process of resolving those conflicts, and sort of an integrative process. And peace is sort of a byproduct.
Okay, I am going to try to reflect that. So there was someone who talked about peace, and basically what the essence of that is that if you want peace, there has to be an integration of all the different sort of viewpoints and perspectives, that there has to be some type of shared, integrative, collective appreciation.
Process, yeah, maybe a process. And the process is empathy, is resolving conflict with empathy and creativity, because creative ideas bubble up, and no violence, and it's never ending. It's an ongoing process.
Right. So it's a creative process. It's a creative process which has empathy and creativity as a process, and then it's ongoing.
Yep, that's exactly it. And the other thing I was thinking of, we're coming up to the end of the time here, and I was thinking maybe we should do an empathy marathon, like some Saturday. So we start maybe a little bit earlier, and we go for 8 hours, and we record the whole thing and live stream it too, because we got the live stream button, just as sort of an experiment. Like, what happens if you do 8 hours of empathic listening? What would kind of the energy be like? So I'm just kind of throwing it out there for maybe we'll try that some Saturday.
I think we'd all be challenged very, very differently. So you have this proposal where you're thinking, why don't we do like a marathon of a whole day, 8 hours of empathy online? We start a little bit earlier, we go for 8 hours and just see what happens, see what breakthroughs we can make.
Yeah, and you can take a break, go off to the bathroom, take bio breaks or whatever, or get up and stretch and things like that. So you could do that. But I'm really thinking about that because we're sort of have this. Oh, there's a timer. This 2-hour block sort of process. But what if we really experiment with 8-hour blocks or something? And plus, there's this live stream feature. You can live stream to Facebook, and so even we live stream it or something like that too.
So you're seriously considering this. You really want to see where this can go. You want to see the longevity. It's more than just 2 hours. It's more than just an exercise with a few people in a circle. You devote 2 hours of time and you're on, and then you go on with the rest of your day. You want to see what happens when people are applying empathy throughout the day. And, can we sustain it? Are we able to, what new challenges will we face, and how do we face those challenges, and how do we face them together with people who typically practice empathy? Can we do this? Is some creativity, a process here that you're working with that you really want to take it to the next level and see what happens?
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, well, we have just 10 minutes to closing, so maybe we just go around and hear, a minute debrief from everyone. So you want to start, Valerie, since you're the listener?
Sure. Thank you, Edwin. So I think what I'd like to share actually is just that I think that although technology is helping us, and for instance, like Edwin, you just proposed this marathon, which I think is a fabulous idea. I'll show up if it's on a weekend. And I think technology is really affecting us. So I can share that at a different point, but I just wanted to kind of bring it up because I think that is something, it's like the elephant in the room. It helps us, but then it sort of defragments us at the same time. And it's something we need to investigate and sort of like all the things that we talked about today. How can we utilize technology such as the way that you just proposed? And I just wanted to also say to Dwayne, you actually did an excellent job at reflecting me. I know I'm a philosopher, I can go deep. And I want to acknowledge that I hear what you're saying about your cognitive processes and your challenges and your realizations that there's a difference between how you used to cognize and how you do now. And I want to appreciate that. But I also want to say that you actually did very, very well in being able to, because I think like Bill is one of the only people I think that is like really great at just getting me to a T pretty much when I talk, and that's my own challenge. So I just wanted to say thank you for really listening, because I did feel fully heard. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Dwayne, you want to go next since you were mentioned?
Thank you, Valerie, for acknowledging that. It's interesting, everyone's idea of an 8-hour empathy event sounds interesting and challenging. And I would probably challenge myself to participate in it. But I really enjoyed this experience today, and I enjoyed the master class of Empathy Circle here today with all the people who helped create this process being present today. So I think everyone, except maybe one other person who helped in the process. So I think these kinds of experiences are good, being able to be in a larger group sometimes, even though it also has its challenges. I think sometimes it's good to be in a larger group. So I enjoyed the larger group experience with all its challenges. So thank you.
Thanks, Dwayne. Bill, do you want to go?
Yeah, I really appreciated everybody sharing and kind of delving deeper into empathy and how the empathy process reflects nature's process. And yeah, I really enjoyed today. So thanks to everyone.
Larry?
Yeah, I was really moved by our conversation today. I appreciate what Valerie said about the long-term relationship, maybe the eternal, forever, timeless, empathic now, that the empathic state be the unchanging, eternal now. And Dalai Lama said something similar by saying that, the problem with the world is people are being used and objects are being loved. And that's upside down. People are to be loved and objects are to be used. So in that temporary view of things, people become used and users, whereas in the impermanent, eternal now, empathy provides a true foundation for life. So thank you all. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
So Larry, Jana?
I really am happy that I turned up today, and thank you for hearing me and for letting me share. It's 5 hours of Zoom. I think maybe a 5-hour marathon.
need a standing desk. I have a standing desk so you can kind of move, get a little exercise. Graham?
Thank you, Edwin. I've enjoyed today, and I've actually valued this larger group, even though I voted for a smaller group. So thank you. And there's one really big challenge comes out of this, and we saw this in the police exercise. Bill says, for example, that you notice that people come along, they thoroughly enjoy the experience, they may come twice, but then you never see them again. And I've recounted through 2 of the instances where I was sharing about the difficulties I'm having incorporating listening into this recovery home. And the problem is that listening is not part of our culture. It's not acknowledged as something that is a necessary part of our culture. We all believe we do it well enough. And hey, buddy, don't suggest that my listening needs improving. And what I was addressing in my stories about this recovery home is the intensity of the culture that is defined there. And really, woe betide if you break conformity, if you go outside of certain boundaries. And so the broader culture we've got a problem with the broader culture. How do we address that? And how do we change it? And one of the things is we've just got to be persistent. It's going to take us not just a generation, but it's going to take us thousands of years. And I'll see you at the end of that millennium. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, just keep coming back and keep talking about it here for the next millennium. Sounds good. Sally?
Okay. I just want to go to, just reiterate structure using the planning process. And then everything is different and requires a different application based on enthusiasm, or, I mean, certain things nobody's going to want to do willingly, whereas other things people are really going to want to do. So there's different methods in the structure for various different topics, and the specialists in the field actually understand that. And anyway, I think there just needs to be some more structure, and I hate to be the planner in the group. That is annoying, but okay, that's it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sally. So let's see, next week we'll be here again. Next week is also after this call, there'll be the interface. That's every 2 weeks. So you're welcome to come to that. You've got the training on Monday. Let's see, we have on Wednesday, we have the development team for taking on projects. So that's sort of the space for taking on a project. If you have a project you want to work on, and then you can report back and form team members there. And that's Wednesdays, the same time in this Zoom room. Then Bill has the Thursday student one, had a great turnout last week. I think something like 15, 20 people. A lot of them were from Africa, so that was pretty cool. And then Larry, yeah, you have the Friday intro Empathy Movement Cafe. So anything about that to add?
We have plenty of room for more.
Okay, keep the conversation going for the millennium. And then see you next week too. So yeah, that's it. So jazz hands, goodbye for now and see you next time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Take care. Good to see you all.
Good to see you again, Graham.
You,
Take care.
Thank you.
bye.